Today's daf is Eruvin Daf Yutet. I'm recording this early, so if you're listening and it's not Friday yet, just remember that this is Friday's daf. Okay, today's daf is dedicated by Adam Dicker and Caroline Hochstadter in commemoration of the Yurtzeit of Fred Hochstadter, Ephraim ben Baruch Bekela, Zichrono Livracha, an amazing father and Saba, as well as in celebration of the recent marriage of their son, Shimshon Dicker, to Zoe Abudi. Saba would have been very proud of you, Shim and Zoe, and he would have loved the learning at Hadran. Thank you all for providing a beautiful space and environment to learn the daf. It's also sponsored by Gabby and Barry Gelman in honor of their son, Amichai Shalom, becoming a bar mitzvah this Shabbat. Mazal tov. And with that, we will start Daf Yutet. We were in the middle of a list of statements of Rabbi Yirmiyah ben Elazar. I committed that maybe I would come up with something to connect these ideas. So I thought about it somewhat. Well, let's read the last one, and then we'll go back and try to make something out of all these ideas. If you have other ideas, feel free to share them with me. V'amar Rabbi Yirmiyah ben Elazar, Bo re'eh shelo kemidat HaKadosh Baruch Hu midat basar v'dam. God is different than regular people. How so? Midat basar v'dam mitchayev adam hariga l'malchut metilim bo chaka l'toch piv kedei shelo yikalel et hamelech. If you get the death penalty by the king, so we put something in your mouth to prevent you from screaming at the king, because we know you're going to scream and say, hey, what are you doing? You know, it's very unfair. But when God says you're deserving of the death penalty, man is silent. How do we know this? To you is given silence. That's saying to God, it's given silence. It's a pasuk from Tehillim, from Psalms. And it's also, we're going to see Tehillah, it's actually in praise. So they're going to say, V'lo ela shemishabech, not only does one not scream at God when he gets punished, but one also praises God for punishing him. Shneimar Tehillah, because it says Tehillah, which will be praised. V'lo ela shedomelo ki'ilu makriv korban, and not only that, but it's as if he sacrificed to sacrifice. Shneimar u'lecha ishulam neder. By accepting the punishment, it's as if you committed you pay back a promise to God. Hainu dam Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi. This is what Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi says. My dachtiv ovrei be'emek habacha ma'ayan yishituhu gam brachot ya'ateh moreh. Okay, what does this mean? It's a little unclear what it means, but okay, it's a pasuk from Tehillim also. It's ovrei, those who go into the emek habacha, the Valley of Tears. Ma'ayan yishitu will be watered by a stream. Gam brachot ya'ateh moreh. He'll also be covered by the rains. So what does this mean? Ovrei, what's ovrei? Be'emek habacha, those passing through, but they learn ovrei, they darshan, elu b'nei adam she'ovrim al ritzono shel makom. It's those who transgress, they go against what God says. Emek, so what's the emek? Shemamikim lahem Gehennom. They go all the way down to the depths of Gehennom. Habacha, what is habacha? Shebochin u'moridim d'ma'ot k'mayan shel shitin. They pour out tears like the way the shitin were the cavities in the temple, where in the mizbeach, the altar, where the wine libations would drip down, and we did the water libations there also. So there they were these, it would go down like the Mayan of Shittin. Gam brachot ya'ateh moreh. What's this? Shematzdikim alehem et hadin. They basically accept the word of God. Okay, these are evil people. When they get punished, they accept the word of God. V'omrim, don't worry, soon we're going to ask, what do you mean they accept the word of God? V'omrim lefanav, ribono shel olam, yafeh danta, yafeh zakita, yafeh chiyavta, v'yafeh tikanta gehenom l'reshaim, gan eden l'tzadikim. Okay? He basically accepts his fate and realizes that God is a true God. He rules justly, even if I'm deserving of punishment. The evil people accept it upon themselves. So now the Gemara says, is this really true? Ini v'ha'amar Rabbi Shimon ben Lakish reshaim afilu al pitcho shel Gehennom einam chozrim b'tshuva. Evil people, even when they're at the gates of hell, they're not chozrim b'tshuva. Even when they realize they're finished, they still don't change their ways. Shene'amar, how do we see this? A verse from Yeshayahu Samach Vav. Vayetzu v'ra'u b'pigrei ha'anashim ha'posh'im bi. I went out and saw the bodies of the people that were going against me. So what do you see here? It doesn't say that transgressed in the past. It says push'im presently. So what do we learn from this? Okay, they continually sin. They don't ever change their ways. So how can you say that the Rish'im accept the judgment? So they say, Lo kashya haba poshe Israel, haba poshe avdei kochavim. There's a difference between Jewish people who sin, they turn back to God, and non-Jewish people do not turn back to God. Now, again, you might say this seems unfair. It's not necessarily an accurate depiction of what really happens. But again, you have to remember, the Gemara is a book focused on the Jewish people, and they want to show, hey, look, you should, right? This is a way of encouraging, again, this is how I view things. It's a way of encouraging people to go back and do tshuva, and they're saying it's never too late, okay? Jewish people, the doors are always open, and this is appropriate for Chodesh Elul, for the month of Elul, right? This is the time for repentance, and make sure, even when you're at the gates of hell, it's never too late. Hachinami mistaber, and this is a good explanation to say there's a difference between Poshei Israel and Poshei Avdei Kochavim. De'im ken kashya de Rish Lakish al Rish Lakish. Otherwise, we would have this contradiction between Rish Lakish and Rish Lakish. The Amar Rish Lakish said, Poshei Israel ein or Gehennom sholetet bahem. The people who sin, Poshei Israel, really, right, the sinners of Israel, the fire of Gehennom, of hell, doesn't burn in them. It doesn't take effect. Where do we learn this from? Kal v'chomer mimizbach hazahav. We learn it from a kal v'chomer, from the mizbach hazahav, from the golden altar. Ma mizbach hazahav she'ein alav ele ka'ovi dinar zahav. It have a very thin layer of zahav. And yet, amad kama shanim v'lo shalta bo ha'or. All those years it stood in the temple, constantly there were fires being burned on it, and it never, right, this is the incense mizbeach, the one that was inside the sanctuary, and it never got destroyed by the fire. This is an analogy for Poshei Israel, a metaphor for Poshei Israel. Shemeli'im mitzvot kirimon. Okay, what protects them? Well, they're full of mitzvot like a pomegranate. Okay, this is why we eat pomegranates on Rosh Hashanah, to remind us that we're full of mitzvot. Shneamar kepelach harimon rakatech, a verse from Shir Hashirim. Your temples are like a piece of the rimon, of the pomegranate. Va'amar Rabbi Shimon ben Lakish, here's his drasha, al tikre rakatech, your temples, ela rekatech, change it to empty ones among you. Shafilu rekanim shabach mele'im mitzvot kirimon. Even the empty people among you, among the Jewish people, are still full of mitzvot like a rimon, and that's what protects them. This is interesting compared to what we saw yesterday about someone who does walks, right? We said it was someone who, what was the terrible thing he did? Sorry, right. If he tries to start up with a woman and he does something just so he can look at her, he never gets forgiven. So it's interesting to hear we had the never gets forgiven, and then compared to that, we have that you really can always do tshuva. So here you see, there's no really clear-cut answers, and right? It's just different opinions about it, and obviously it sort of depends on the situation. So there, all the more so that the ore of Gehennom will never get to them, right? Just like the Mizbach HaZahav didn't get destroyed, likewise the Jewish people, even the Rishayim, will not get destroyed. What about the fact that it says they're going into the Valley of Tears, meaning they're going into hell? So what do you mean they're not going to hell? What happens when they get to Gehennom? Who greets them? Avraham Avinu, and he takes them and escorts them not to go in. Okay, he accepts them. Who's the one exception to this rule? And here this goes back to what we said yesterday. Bar mi Yisrael shabal bat avodah ovei kochavim. If a Jew sleeps with a non-Jewish woman, then there's no helping him. Avraham is not going to help him. Why is this? The mishkach orlato v'lo mevashka. What's the issue? Your orla, the foreskin of the man who sleeps with a non-Jewish woman, obviously it's metaphorically, gets covered, and then he's not noticeably Jewish, and then Avraham doesn't know to save him. Again, this idea that Avraham, the symbol of Avraham is the Brit Milah, the covenant he made with God through Brit Milah. In this case, he basically saves everyone who's part of the covenant, and someone who sleeps with a non-Jewish woman has basically removed himself from being part of this covenant, and therefore he's not recognized by Avraham and he doesn't get saved. Rav Kahana has another question. We said posh'im means they're continually sinning, right? And they never go back. This was the other side, the ones who never change their ways. Okay, here's a verse in Vayikra, Hamotzi etchem me'eretz Mitzrayim, for example, or Ki ani Hashem hama'aleh etchem me'eretz Mitzrayim, right? I am God who took you out of Egypt, and I am God who brought you out of the land. Now, both of those are read as hamotzi v'hamaleh, as if it's done continuously. So how could that be? Didn't we just say that if something's said in present tense, it means also going forward, right? Demasiku demapiku. This is talking about past. It's not understood to be in present tense. Ela de'asik v'afik hachanami depasheu. So then they say this could also be explained, the earlier way we explained it could be explained as they sinned in the past and not that they're continually sinning. Amar Rabbi Yirmiyah ben Elazar, Shlosha ptachim yesh leGehennom, echad b'midbar, echad b'yam, ve'echad b'Yerushalayim. Now Rabbi Yirmiyah ben Elazar continues and he says another statement. There's 3 entrances to Gehennom. One is to hell, one is in the desert, one is in the sea, and one is in Yerushalayim, in Jerusalem. Bamidbar dechtiv, vayirduhem v'chol asher lahem chayim sha'ola bayam. Okay, this is Korach and his people. What happened to them, right? The people that were with Korach, they went all down into Chayim Sha'ola. So there you see, in the desert, there was Sha'ol is always the depth. That means they went down, swallowed up by the ground, which is a reference to going to hell. Chayim Sha'ola bayam, where do we see it in the Yam, in the sea? Dechtiv mi beten Sha'ol shavati shamata koli. Right, Yonah, this is Yonah the prophet, again connected to Yom Kippur. He says, right, read it on Yom Kippur. He says, from the stomach of the depths, I called out to God and you heard my voice. He was also basically in hell there when he got swallowed up. So here you see it also is in the depths of the sea. It has a fire in Zion and a furnace in Yerushalayim. Generally, we see fiery furnaces. That's a reference to Gehennom. V'tana debei Rabbi Yishmael, what is it? And he explains, what does this mean? Asher orlo b'Tzion zo Gehennom, v'tanorlo b'Yerushalayim zo pitcha shel Gehennom. And Tzion is another word. Zion is another word for Yerushalayim. So this is in Yerushalayim. There we have 3 places where hell can be. V'tuleika, there's nowhere else, just those 3. Amar of Miriam, Amar Rabbi Yosef ben Levi, v'Amar la'atana, Rabbi Miriam b'debei Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai. Okay, it's debate who exactly said this. Shteit marot yesh begei ben Hinom. Okay, this is the Valley of Hinom, okay, which is in Yerushalayim. It's considered here on the outskirts. Ve'oleh ashan mi benehem. Okay, there's two palm trees, and there's smoke coming in the Gei ben Hinom. There's smoke coming from among them. V'zoi shashaninu, and this is where we see in the source in Sukkah. Tzine har barzel ksherot. Okay, these are these type of trees that the Lulav trees, they're palm trees that we can take a Lulav from. They have less leaves than most, but they're ksherot for Lulav. And then it says there, V'zoi pitcha shel Gehennom, and this is the opening of Gehennom right there. So now they say, so there you see another place. So what does the Gemara say? What do you mean? Dilma haynu Yerushalayim. Maybe the one in Yerushalayim is there. We didn't say where in Yerushalayim. Must be in Gei ben Hinom. Amar Rabbi Yosef ben Levi, and by the way, we're going to see Gei ben Hinom and Gehennom sound the same. So we'll get to that very soon. Amar Rabbi Yosef ben Levi, Sheva Shemot yesh leGehennom ve'eluhem. Here are 7 names for Gehennom. Here they are for hell. Sheol, which is the depths. Avadon, it's like disaster, like everything being wiped out. Be'er Shachat, pit that's right, a deep pit. Bor Sha'on, clay that's all disgusting. One second. Sorry, my mistake. I just translated that wrong. The Titi Hayevan is the, what do you call it? Like clay that's all dirty and thick. A Bor Sha'on is a pit that's all disgusting. Okay, or I'm trying to think of the word. Let me just see the way they translate it here. Words to translate. Let's see. Sha'on is okay. Be'er shachat here. Be'er shachat. Right. They don't even translate them. Okay. I see here in the English they don't even translate what it is. Okay, but it basically means the pit. Okay, it's in a pit, and then right tit. Right, it's pronounced titayaven. Okay, which we're going to explain what that is. Vit salmavet, okay, and salmavet is another word like sal mavet, the shadow of death. Ve'eretz hatachtit, the land from under. And okay, so those are the 7 names of Gehennom. So now we're going to go through them, and soon when we get back to this Gei ben Hinom, isn't that another name? And we'll explain. Sha'ol d'chtiv mi beten sha'ol shavati shamata koli. This was Yonah, we saw. He called out to God from the beten of Sheol, from hell. Avadon dichtiv hayisupar bakever chastecha emunatcha ba'avadon. Once you die, will they tell of your chesed, of the things you did, and the emunatcha, and your steadfastness with God? Will they talk about when you're in avadon, right? When you're in hell? Be'er shachat dichtiv, right? That's a pasuk in. Didn't check. That's a pasuk in Tehillim. Be'er shachat dichtiv ki lo ta'azov nafshi l'shaol lo titen chasidecha lirot shachat. Okay, I won't let them to see. I won't let my chasidim see the shachat. Okay, this pit. Ubor sha'on. Sorry, this is right. Be'er shachat. We would define as. Let's see how they define it. Right, to see the pit. This is really called the pit. Okay, they won't see, like to say the pits, right? It won't see the pit. Now they say. Be'er shachat. Be'or sha'on v'tite hayevan dichtiv. Vayaleni mibor sha'on mitit hayaven. Okay, this is, I will be brought up from, okay, here they're going to explain it. I will be brought up from out of the mire, from the gruesome pit and out of the miry clay. Okay, that's how they define these words. B'tzalmavet dertiv yoshvei choshach b'tzalmavet, those who sit in darkness and the shadow of death. Be'eretz ha'tachtit, we don't have a verse for this, gemarahu, it's a tradition. Now they say, v'tuleka, we don't have any more, va'ika, Gehennom. What about Gehennom? Didn't we say, right? Which is Ge ben Hinom. So they say Geisha Amuka, right? Big. This should be changed to Ki Gehennom, right? They say Gehennom is Geisha Amuka Ki Gehennom. In other words, Ge ben Hinom is a word for or actually here they say, actually no, they're not connecting this to Ge ben Hinom. Here they're just saying the word Gehennom. Okay, not Ge ben Hinom, but what about? Right, they're saying, sorry, this is where I confused it. Okay. Ha'ika Gehennom, isn't there Gehennom? So they say, what's Gehennom? It's just describing the location. Ge sha'amuka ki Gehennom. It's the Ge of Hinom, like Ki Hinom. Okay? Like the Ge ben Hinom. In other words, Sha'kol yored la'alis kechinam. And what it's saying is, the word is basically saying, what is the place? It's a place that is, okay, shahakol yored la'al iskei chinam. Okay, meaning, Ge ben Hinom, hey and chet often switch. People go there for chinam, for no good reason, or, meaning they wasted, right? Chinam sometimes is to do things without, right, for nothing. Or some people say chinam is, it means basically for things that they did that were kind of not good things at all, and they're called nothing. Okay, they're really something, obviously. But what they mean is they got involved in things they shouldn't have gotten involved in, and that's why they went there. But it's not actually a name of a place. It's not a name for Gehennom. It's just describing what is Gehennom. It's those who went there for nothing. Va'ika tafte. What about tafte? Dichtiv ki aroch me'etmol tafte. Okay, that this was already from, right here the verse is from ki otcha me'etmol, ki aruch me'etmol tafte, gam hi lamelech huchan ha'emik Hirchav medurata esh ve'etzim her ben nishmat Hashem kegnachal gofrit bo arabo. It's a pasuk in Yeshayahu which is describing the destruction, and there it talks about tafta, which is already from before, ready to burn people in. So what do they answer? Shekol hamit, again, it's describing Gehennom. It's not a word for Gehennom. It's describing what it is. Shekol hamit pateh biyitzro yipol sham. Anyone who is seduced by his evil inclination will fall there. Gan Eden, Amarish Lakish. Okay, now we're going to talk about where is Gan Eden. Amarish Lakish, im be'eretz Yisrael hi Beit Sham pitcho. The entrance must be through Beit Sham because the fruits there and the produce is amazing in that area. Im ba'Arabia, if it's in Arabia, Beit Garan pitcho, then it must be Beit Garan. They're basically talking about places that remind them of, if you would think of any utopia in the world, it must be in these places. The im ben hanarotu in Bavel, if it's between the rivers, then, right, the rivers they mean here, right, if it's in between the rivers of Babylon, then Dumaskenim Pitcho, then the Petach is by Dumaskenim, where also the produce grew really nicely. Bebavel Abai Mishabach Beperi Me'ever Yamina. He said the stuff on the right side of the Euphrates is the best. Rava Mishtabach Beperi de Harpanya. He said Harpanya has the best fruits. This is again just a way of praising where they were from and saying this is like Gan Eden. Okay, before we move on, I want to go back because now we finished all the statements of Rabbi Yirmiyah ben Elazar. So if we try to review, we had the thing about the two partsufim. We had the issue about taking the Trumot Masro from the Amei Haaretz, if it's these figs that grew in the winter that are kind of okay, but not great. And there you have to take because we assume that they're good enough that we have to worry they didn't take. We had the Adam HaRishon gave birth to evil spirits, right? We had about, I don't know if I said it well enough, I didn't review well enough, but the du partsufim, how man was created with two sides, male and female. That man then, after the sin, he gave birth to all sorts of evil spirits. We had don't speak all the praises of a person in front of him because he might get arrogant. Be proactive about, right, learn at night. That's important. Don't take, even if it's bad food, better to make your own food then and work for your own food and get it from God rather than rely on people. We had, once the mikdash is there, you can no longer fully reach God. We can only call out in the name of Yud Hey. Then we had our effects on our neighbors, Oil Rasha, Oil Shchino. And then we had what we saw today about, we started with, right, that God, people don't curse God when something bad happens to them, right? They understand what's coming their way and they understand where it came from. And this is how Jews are likely to repent and to understand their bad ways. And then we have that last thing about the different names of Gehennom. This is a little different than the other statements, but there's 3 entrance ways into Gehennom. Okay, they don't all connect in a perfect manner. And what I mentioned yesterday, and I want to quote it in the previous shiur, which is, another statement Rabbi Yirmiyah ben Elazar says is, you're better off working than relying on the merits of your fathers to save you. And I think that line is key to understanding this, because what combines all these, or many of these, you'll have to think if they all combine perfectly into this, but is that one has to be responsible for one's actions, and one has to be proactive. Be proactive about learning. Be proactive about making a living. Be proactive about where you live and finding the right neighbors, right? Worry about not getting into Gehennom, right? Be proactive. If you get punished, take that as a sign and repent. If someone didn't take the Trumot Masrot, you have to do it, even if maybe it's not the best produce, but don't leave anything up to chance. And the idea of the creation of man and woman together, that's a good question, how that fits in, because it's not exactly related to your actions so much, but maybe again, it's a matter of, maybe I was thinking if you compare that to the Zanav, it's that woman was created on her own. It wasn't that woman came out of man and that she's reliant on man and getting back to, but this idea about people being proactive, that everyone is created in an equal manner. And maybe that's the idea. And everyone has to take responsibility as if they're their own individual and not say, oh, I'm reliant. Like almost the idea of her being taken from man is almost saying she's maybe reliant on man. And maybe that's what he's trying to say, is that everyone kind of has their own, take what God gives you and make the best of what you have. And, even if it's not the best food you're going to be eating, or even, right, you have to make the best of the situation that you're in. So that's some food for thought. Specifically Gefet, which is coming out sometime today, is about the Tosfot, about the Beit HaKnesset. If you remember yesterday, we saw that the worst thing possible is to pass by the Beit Knesset and not daven with the tzibur. And what they talk about in that chapter is all about the importance of community and davening in a community, and specifically in light of Corona, and an interesting Tosfot there. So if your Hebrew is good enough, then you should go on the Hadron Hebrew site and find the Gefet and this week's shiur of Gefet. Okay, continuing on. Ubenehem kimelo shtei. Okay, now we had, if you remember, we're back to our pasei biraot. Okay, and maybe again, this idea of the pasei biraot was a way that the rabbis took control. If you go back to Rabbi Yirmiyah ben Elazar, it's all about being proactive. And they said, here we have a situation, and we need to come up with a solution. People need to drink, and we're going to come up with a solution to allow them. And they came up with all sorts of ways that we could allow using this pasei biraot. So now let's look inside again. We have Ubenehem, we're now quoting the line, right? We have these 4 Jumadim, which are like Shmona, or Rabbi Meir says Shmona, that are like Shnei Masar. And then we said, Benehem, Kimelo Shtei Rivakot Shel Shalosh Shalosh Bakar, right? 3 animals, 2 things of 3 animals together, or 2 yolks of 4 animals together. Pshita. So now the Gemara says, isn't this obvious? Kevan detane lehu kshurot. Okay, what we're really looking at is the line kshurot. We're talking about the later line, which is kshurot velo mutarot, tied and not loose. Now, if you say tied, then obviously they're not loose. So what does this mean? Kshurot ke'en kshurot. Kevan t'tale le kshurot havu aniyadina delo havu mutarot. Once you said tied, I know they're not untied. So ma'u detema. So now why do you have this? Ma'u detema kshurot ke'en kshurot aval mamash lo. They have to be maybe the size, the width that they could, that it's if they were tied, but they don't actually have to go in tied together. So now they say, kamash malam velo mutarot. They say, no, you can't go in untied, meaning when you bring in your animals, they have to be tied together. Echad nechneset v'echad yotzet. So one group is going in, one group is going out. Tana rivka nechneset v'rivka yotzet. Okay, so they say, right, one goes in, one goes out. Tana Rabbanan, kama roshav v'ruba shel para. What's, right, we said before, you have to have the majority, the head, and the majority of the body of the animal inside. How much is that in that space? Shte amot, okay, that's 2 amot, is the rosh and the body. The length of the body is 2 amot. The kama of yan, how thick? Ama ushne shlish ama. Okay, the width is 1 2/3. Shehin ke'eser, that's how we get, now we understand, that's how we get to 10. Or maybe from 10, that's how we get to 3. Right? 2 groups of 3 each, because he says, right, if you count 1.67, right, 1 2/3 times 6, because you can fit in 6 animals according to Rabbi Meir, you get to 10.02, close enough to 10. Remember, we said they're not really so careful about all their numbers. Rabbi Yehuda Omer kishloshes ama or karba'asrei ama. Here we really see they're not so accurate with their numbers or precise. Rabbi Yehuda says, like 3, right, 13 amot or like 14 amot, okay? A little like 13, a little like 14, which basically, it's really 13 1/3, because he says 1.67 times 8 animals. And that gets you up to 13.36. It's a little over 13 1/3. So now they say, ke'eser, ha'eser havim. Why do you say like 10, according to Rabbi Meir? It's actually 10, even though it's 10.02, close enough to 10. So they say, that's why they said ke'eser, because kishloshes, it's not exactly shloshes. So they said, how could you say it's like 13? Tfei havian, it's more than that. It's 13 1/3. It's because they wanted to say like arba asrei. Okay, so then they say, what do you mean like arba asrei? But it's not 14. So Amar Papa, this is how you should understand it. Now one might think that that's 13 1/2, but it really is 13 1/3, right? If you do the calculation. Again, it shows they weren't very precise. Amar Papa, if it's the bore itself, the pit is 6, or the well is 8 amot wide. So now everyone agrees. We're now going to say there's really no machlokes Rabbi Meir, Rabbi Yehuda in every case. If it's 8 wide, then everyone agrees to be inam pshutim. Remember our minimum measurement. Okay, our minimum measurement. Remember Rabbi Meir said you have to put ones in the middle also. So he doesn't think you have to in this case, because if it's 8 amot, and then you need 2 amot, because each of the animals to fit rosh over rubo is 2 amot long. So you need 2 amot on every side, which means you're going to end up with a space of 12 by 12 amot. If you have 12 by 12 amot, and each of your posts are 1 on either end, 1 amma, remember there were 6 tfachim, 1 amma. So take away 2 amot, right? And now you end up, if the whole length is 12, you're going to have 10 in between, right? 10 from post to post, because again, 8 plus 2 amot on every side, that's going to add 4 altogether, right? 2 on each side. So you're going to end up with 12 by 12, 2 posts, each counting as 1, and then minus 12 minus 2 on either end, you're going to end up with an opening of 10. So in that case, if it's that, everybody agrees that you don't need, even Rabbi Meir, it doesn't require anything in the middle because there's only 10. If the bore is 12, even Rabbi Yehuda will agree in that case, you need pshutin. Why is that? Because 12, add another 4 amot, 2 on each side for the animals, you're going to end up with 16. If you put a post at 16, you're going to have 14. Even for Rabbi Yehuda, 14 is too much, so you're going to have to put a post in the middle. So obviously, what's their disagreement on in between these two numbers? It's not exactly accurate, but basically anything in between where it will be more than 10, less than 13 1/3, then they're going to have a debate. Rabbi Meir is going to make you put up another post, and Rabbi Yehuda won't. The Rabbi Meir being inam shooting, he'll require. The Rabbi Yehuda lo being inam shooting, you won't need to put up another post. So now they say, Papa, my kamashmalan, Tanina, we already learned this all in a Braita. What is he trying to tell us? That the measurements are 13 and a third minus, right, versus 10, and that's basically what he's saying is obvious if you know 10 and 13 and a third. So the Gemara answers, Braita lo shmi alei, v'kamashmalan ke Braita. But Papa actually didn't know that Braita. We have the advantage that we have a Gemara written in front of us. He never heard that Braita, and that's why he was telling us what he really wanted to tell us in saying that was that the measurements are 13 and a third versus 10. That's what he wanted you to know. Okay, now we're having simanim for all the next section. This next section is going to have 6 questions that Abaye asked Rabba. Remember, Rabba was his adopted father and his teacher. Ba'minei Abaye mi Rabba, all about pasei biraot. He'erich b'dimyonim kishiur pshutim. What if your pasim were longer? And they weren't 1 amma, they were longer, okay? Like a bigger, they extended. In other words, does Rabbi Meir say in order to make it less than 10, you have to put a post in the middle? Or can you just stretch your diyumadim? And that way until it's less than 10 of an opening? Or does it have to be something in the middle? Amar lei, Tinitua, let's learn it from here. Ubavachi, your beba pasim, what did we say? Right? As long as your marbeh pasim. Okay, this was in the Mishnah. It said, let me just read it inside. Mutar laharchik kol shehu, ubevad sheyarbeh pasim. You can make it longer as long as you put more pasim up. So what do you see? Marbeh pasim, my lavdim ma'arich b'diyumodim. Your bebe pasim, they assume means make your pas longer. So they say, no, that doesn't prove anything. Lo de mapish va'avid pshutim. Maybe it means just put more pasim up. So there's different ways of reading this. Ihachi, hayu bavad shirbeh bipasim. Ad shirbeh pasim mebaile. It doesn't say yirbeh bipasim, add more pasim. It says yirbeh pasim, okay, which sounds like make your pasim bigger, okay, as opposed to make it bigger with more pasim. So they say, Tani, I'll change it to ad shirbeh pasim. It should say until you add more pasim. Okay, sorry, it said, I read this wrong. Ubavad shirbeh bipasim, it says. It should have said ad shirbeh pasim. If it wanted you to add more, it should have said add more pasim. Instead, it says yirbeh bipasim, which sounds like you're adding to the pasim that already exists, which sounds like you're just stretching your dumadim. So therefore, they say, no, just change it to ad shirbeh pasim. Iga de Amre, some people had a different version here. They said, it read like this. Amrle, tanitua ubavad shirbeh bipasim. So we quoted the Mishnah saying this line, ad shirbeh bipasim, my lavdim mafish va'avid pshutim. Is it not that you put up more pasim? And they said, lo, tamarich b'jumadim. No, what it meant is you stretch the jumadim. And then they say, and in fact, you can prove that from the language. Hachinami mistabra midikatani ubavad shirbeh bipasim shma mina. And they say, one can derive from the language that it's specifically, right, that it's yarbeh bipasim, you can stretch them. Shma mina. Okay, so in this case, right, we had the first case, it sounded like we changed it to ad shirbeh pasim, that you specifically need to add more. And here it sounds like you could stretch it. So it's unclear what the answer is. A second question. What does Rabbi Yehuda say you do if it's more than 13? Do you stretch the jumadim or do you add pasim? Let's learn it from the Mishnah. Right? How close? You have to at least have space for Roshav Ruba, the body of the para, of the cow. Right? Even a big space. Rabbi Yehuda Omer Beit Satayim Mutar Yoter Mi Beit Satayim Asur. Remember, Rabbi Yehuda said it was limited to a certain space. Amrulo. Now, in this, here we're going to have a different, this is source actually different than our Mishnah. In this case, they say, Amrulo, the Rabbi Yehuda, Iyatamodeh B'dir V'saru Muksa V'chatzer Afilu Bat Chamisha Kulin Afilu Bat Asara Kulin Shemutar. Don't you agree in all these cases when it's surrounded with a wall that it would work? So wouldn't you say the same thing here, even if it's big? So now they say like this. Amar Lan, he says to them, Zo Mechitza Ve'elu Pasim. That has a wall around it, and this just has pasim. V'im'ita, and if we wanted to say you could stretch the diyomid and it could function like a wall, then it should say Zo Mechitza V'Zo Mechitza, but he calls it a pas as if it's not a mechitza. Mebaile, he should have said that. So then they say, no, that doesn't prove anything. Hachikamer, Zo Torat Mechitza Aleh U'Pirtzoteh Be'eser. Ve'elu Torat Pasim Aleh U'Pirtzotam B'Shloshes Ama V'Shlish. He says, no, the laws for them are different because that's judged by laws of mechitza, and that 10. And these are judged by laws of pasim, even if maybe they form a mechitza because we stretch them longer, still it's a different rule for them, and they're treated like pasim, and their pert size is 13 and a third. Third question. What if you have a pile? Okay, here's a picture. You have a pile of dirt in your, okay, we're getting to our first picture for today. Pile of dirt in your corner there, okay? And it's what we've always talked about, which is for every 4 amot, it goes up 10 tefachim, okay? That's your angle, basically. Okay, if that's the case, so does that work as a diomet or not? Amalei Tani Chua, let's learn it from here. There's a machloka between two Tanaim. Rabbi Shimon ben Elazar Omer, Hayta Even Merubat. This is the next picture, picture number 129. The first one was 128. Now we're at 129. Okay, picture number 129. You see we have in the corner, we have a circle and we have a square, okay, instead of a diomet. So now we're going to see what the halacha is. Shimon ben Elazar says, Hayta Sham Even Merubat, if you had a square rock, stone, if you were to cut off the edges and have one amma on one side, one amma on the other, nido mishum diomet. You could count that as a diomet. And if not, then it doesn't count as a diomet. Rabbi Shmuel ben Elshah Rabbi Yochanan ben Baruch Omer, Haytashem Evan Agula, Ro'in. Now he adds, he said, even if it's round, Ro'in kol she'ilu. Now notice he adds techakek v'techalek. It's not just if you cut off. But first you would have to kind of shape it into a square, like look at the circle as if it's a square, and then cut off. If you still have an amma each side, nido mishum diomet. So b'mai kamiflage, what's the root of the machloket? Mar savar chadro and amrinan. One says we can view this square as if it's cut off, but trey rowing lo amrinan. The first opinion doesn't think that you could both turn the circle into a square and then cut it off. That's too much. The other one says you could actually say both. So what he's saying is it's the same machloket there would be the issue here about can you view this mound. You'd have to basically take off, right, as if view the mound as if it was square, and then you'd have to basically cut off the edges, right, and just leave the edges. So that already would be 2 row, and it would only work according to the second opinion. Next question. We saw this before. If you have a bunch of reeds standing up and there's less than 3 tvachim in between, can that work as a diomet? Amarle, Tani Tuay said we can learn it. We saw this. Hayasham ilan, if there was a tree or a gader or a fence, or chitzat kanim, or a mechitza of reeds, that should be our case. Nido mishum diomet. My love is chitzat kanim, not kaneh kaneh pachot mishlosha. Isn't that what it is? So they say, no, hainu gader. If you say that, then that's basically a fence, right? If it's now he's going to say, if you assume it's kaneh kaneh pachot mishlosha, then that's basically the same thing as saying a fence. And then elamai lach lamemar trei gavne gader hachinami trei gavne ilan. Oh, I skipped. Sorry, I knew something didn't make sense. Let's go back. My love kaneh kaneh pachot mishlosha, right? Then they say lo gudrita dekane. It's a bush that grew like a fence. In other words, it was all solid. Okay, that's what it must mean. So then they say, that doesn't make any sense. Then it's just like a tree. And it said tree, fence, or kanim, chitzat kanim. So they say, okay, so then what do you want to say? Elamai kaneh kaneh pichot mishlosha really is open, a bunch of reeds with space in between them. Well, then hainu gader, it must be the same, then it's the same thing as a fence. Because with din levud, it works just like a fence. Elamai lach lamemer, the only thing you could say is trei gavne gader. You have to say either it's talking about 2 types of gedera or hachanami trei gavne ilan, or it's 2 types of trees. So basically, it can be explained in either way. Either it's a bush that grew in fully, or it's with empty spaces, and then either it's a little different type of fence or it's a little different type of tree. So we don't really know. Ika de amre, some people say that it went like this, the discussion between them. Gudrita de kane kamebaile. Rabbi's question was about a bush that grows in like a fence, full. Gudrita de kane ma'i, he asked him. Amarle, Tani Chua, why don't we learn from here? Hayasham gadero ilano chitzakanim nido mishum diomet. Don't they mean, my love, gudrita de kane? And now they're going to do the reverse order. They first are going to assume, isn't it a fully grown in bush? And then they say, lo, kaneh kaneh pachot mishlosha. No, it must be reeds separated by less than 3 tvachim each. They say, yihachi hainu gader. Well, then it's a gader. So then they say, Ve'elamai gudrita dekane hainu ilan, right? Well, then we're going to say either which way. It's either like a tree or it's like a fence, and therefore elamai lach lememar trei gavne ilan hachanami trei gavne gader. So either which way, it's not clear. Okay, so we had a lot of questions of Abai. Most of them did not have clear-cut answers. We're going to continue in the next daf with more questions that Abai asked Rabbah. Okay, with that, we'll finish for today. Have a good day.